Well, could you sleep? The Count asked the next night upon his arrival in the cage. Quite honestly, no, Westley replied in his normal voice. I'm glad you're being honest with me. I'll be honest with you. No more charades between us, the Count said, putting down a number of notebooks and quill pens and ink bottles. I must carefully track your reactions, he explained. In the name of science? The Count nodded. If my experiments are valid, my name will be last beyond my body. It's immortality I'm after, to be quite honest. He adjusted a few knobs on the machine. I suppose you're naturally curious as to how this works. I have spent the night pondering, and I know no more than when I started. It appears to be a great conglomeration of soft-rimmed cups of infinitely varied sizes, together with a wheel and a dial and a lever, and what it does is beyond me. Also glue, added the Count, pointing to a small tub of thick stuff to keep the cups attached. And with that, he set to work, taking cup after cup, touching the soft rims with glue, and setting them against Westley's skin. Eventually, I'll have to put one on your tongue too, the Count said, but I'll save that for last in case you have any questions. This certainly isn't the easiest thing to get set up, is it? I'll be able to fix that in later models, the Count said. At least those are my present plans. And he kept right on putting cup after cup on Wesley's skin until every inch of exposed surface was covered. So much for the outside, the Count said then. This next is a bit more delicate. Try not to move. I'm chained hand, head, and foot, Westley said. How much movement do you think I'm capable of? Are you really as brave as you sound, or are you a little frightened? The truth, please. This is for posterity, remember. I'm a little frightened, Westley replied. The Count jotted that down, along with the time. Then he got down to the fine work, and soon there were tiny soft-rimmed cups on the insides of Wesley's nostrils, against his eardrums, under his eyelids, above and below his tongue. And before the Count arose, Westley was covered inside and outside with the things. Now all I do, the Count said very loudly, hoping Westley could hear, is get the wheel going to its fastest spin so that I have more than enough power to operate. And the dial can be set from 1 to 20, and this being the first time, I will set it at the lowest setting, which is 1. And then all I need to do is push the lever forward, and we should, if I haven't gummed it up, be in full operation. But Westley, as the lever moved, took his brain away, and when the machine began, Westley was stroking her autumn-colored hair and touching her skin of wintry cream, and then his world exploded, because the cups were everywhere, and before they had punished his body but left his brain, only not the machine. The machine reached everywhere. His eyes were not his to control, and his ears could not hear her gentle, loving whisper, and his brain slid far from love into the deep fall of despair, hit hard, fell again, down through the house of agony into the county of pain. Inside and out, Wesley's world was ripping apart, and he could do nothing but crack along with it. The Count turned off the machine then, and as he picked up his notebooks, he said, "As you no doubt know, the concept of a suction pump is centuries old. Well, basically, that's all this is, except instead of water, I'm sucking life. I've just sucked away 1 year of your life. Later, I'll set the dial higher, certainly to 2 or 3, perhaps even a 5. Theoretically, 5 should be 5 times more severe than what you've just endured, so please be specific in your answers. Tell me now, honestly, how do you feel?" In humiliation and suffering and frustration and anger and anguish so great it was dizzying, Westley cried like a baby. "Interesting," said the Count, and carefully noted it down. It took Yellen a week to get his enforcers together in sufficient number, together with an adequate brute squad. And so, 5 days before the wedding, he stood at the head of his company awaiting the speech of the prince. This was in the castle courtyard, and when the prince appeared, the Count was, as usual, with him. Although not as usual, the Count seemed preoccupied, which of course he was, though Yellen had no way of knowing that. The Count had sucked 10 years from Westley this past week, and with a life of 65 that was average for a Florinese male, the victim had approximately 30 years remaining. Assuring he was about 25 when they started experimenting. But how best to go about dividing that? The Count was simply in a quandary. So many possibilities, but which would prove, scientifically, most interesting? The Count sighed. Life was never easy. You are here, the prince began, because there may be another plot against my beloved. I charge each and every one of you with being her personal protector. I want the thieves' quarter empty and all the inhabitants jailed 24 hours before my wedding. Only then will I rest easy. Gentlemen, I beg you, think of this mission as being an affair of the heart, and I know you will not fail. With that, he pivoted and, followed by the count, hurried from the courtyard, leaving Yellen in command. The conquest of the thieves' quarter began immediately. Yellen worked long and hard at it each day, but the thieves' quarter was a mile square, so there was much to do. Most of the criminals had been through unjust and illegal roundups before, so they offered little resistance. They knew the jails were not sold enough for all of them, so if it meant a few days' incarceration, what did it matter? There was, however, a second group of criminals, those who realized that capture meant, for various past performances, death, and these, without exception, resisted. In general, Yellen, through a adroit handling of the brute squad, was able to bring these bad fellows eventually under control. Still, 36 hours before the sunset wedding, there were half a dozen holdouts left in the thieves' quarter. Yellen arose at dawn and, tired and confused, not one of the captured criminals seemed to come from Guilder. He gathered the best of the brute squad and led them into the thieves' quarter for what simply had to be the final foray. Yellen went immediately to Falkbridge's alehouse, for setting all save two brutes off on various tasks, keeping a noisy one and a quiet one for his own needs. He knocked on Falkbridge's door and waited. Falkbridge was by far the most powerful man in the thieves' quarter. He seemed almost to own half of it, and there wasn't a crime of any dimension he wasn't behind. He always avoided arrest, and everyone except Yellen thought Falkbridge must be bribing somebody. Yellen knew he was bribing somebody, since every month, rain or shine, Falkbridge came to Yellen's house and gave him a satchel full of money. Who? Falkbridge called from inside the alehouse. The chief of all enforcement in Florin City, accompanied by brutes, Yellen replied. Completeness was one of his virtues. Oh, Falkbridge opened the door. For a power, he was very unimposing, short and chubby. Come in. Yellen entered, leaving the two brutes in the doorway. Get ready and be quick, Yellen said. Hey, Yellen, it's me, Falkbridge said softly. I know, Yellen said softly right back, but please do me a favor, get ready. Pretend I did. I'll stay in the alehouse, I promise. I got enough food, no one will ever know. The prince is without mercy, Yellen said. If I let you stay and I'm found out, that's it for me. I've been paying you 20 years to stay out of jail. You're a rich man just so I don't have to go to jail. Where's the logic of me paying you and no advantages? I'll make it up to you. I'll get you the best cell in Florin City. Do you trust me? How could I trust a man I paid 20 years to stay out of jail when all of a sudden, the minute a little extra pressure's on, he says go to jail? I'm not going. You! Yellen signaled to the noisy one. The brute started running forward. Put this man in the wagon immediately, Yellen said. Falkbridge was starting to explain when the noisy one clubbed him across the neck. Not so hard, Yellen cried. The noisy one picked up Falkbridge, tried dusting his clothes. Is he alive? Yellen asked. See, I didn't know you wanted him breathing in the wagon. I thought you only wanted him in the wagon breathing or not, so... Enough, Yellen interrupted, and, upset, he hurried out of the alehouse while the noisy one brought Falkbridge. Is that everyone then? Yellen asked as various brutes were visible, leaving the thieves' quarter, pulling various wagons. I think there's still the fencer with the brandy, the noisy one began. See, they tried getting him out yesterday, but I can't be bothered with a drunk. I'm an important man. Get him out of here and do it now, both of you. Take the wagon with you and be quick. This quarter must be locked and deserted by sundown, or the prince will be mad at me, and I don't like it much when the prince is mad at me. We're going, the noisy one replied, and he hurried off, letting the quiet one bring the wagon with Falkbridge inside. They tried getting this fencer yesterday, some of the standard enforcers, but it seems he has certain sword skills that made them wary, but I think I have a trick that will work. The quiet one hurried along behind, dragging the wagon. They rounded a corner, and from around another corner just up ahead, a kind of drunken mumbling was starting to get louder. I'm getting very, very bored, Vizzini, came from out of sight. 3 months is a long time to wait, especially for a passionate Spaniard. Much louder now, and I am very passionate, Vizzini, and you are nothing but a tardy Sicilian. So if you're not here in 90 more days, I'm done with you. You hear? Done. Much softer now. I didn't mean that, Vizzini. I just love my filthy stoop. Take your time. The noisy brute slowed. That kind of talk goes on all day. Ignores. And keep the wagon out of sight. The quiet one pushed the wagon almost to the corner and stopped it. Stay with the wagon, the noisy one added, and then whispered, here comes my trick. With that, he walked alone around the corner and stared ahead at the skinny fellow sitting, clutching the brandy bottle on the stoop. Ho there, friend, the noisy one said. I'm not moving. Keep your ho there, said the brandy drinker. Hear me through, please. I have been sent by Prince Humperdinck himself, who is in need of entertainment. Tomorrow is our country's 500th anniversary, and the dozen greatest tumblers and fencers and entertainers are at this very moment competing. The finest pair will compete personally tomorrow for the new bride and groom. Now, as to why I'm here, yesterday some of my friends tried rousing you, and they said later that you resisted with some splendid swords work. So, if you would like, at great personal sacrifice, will rush you to the fencing contest, where, if you are as good as I am told, you might have yet the honor of entertaining the royal couple tomorrow. Do you think you could win such a competition? Breezing. Then hurry while there's still time to enter. The Spaniard managed to stand. He unsheathed his sword and flashed it a few times across the morning. The noisy one took a few quick steps backward and said, no time to waste. Come along now. Then the drunk started yelling, I'm waiting for Vizzini. Meanie, I'm not mean, I'm just following the rule. Cruel, not mean. Can't you understand And here his voice trailed off for a moment as he squinted. Then quietly he said, Fezzik? From behind the noisy one, the quiet one said, who's Fezzik? Inigo took a step from his stoop, trying desperately to make his eyes focus on the brandy. Fezzik, is that a joke you made? The quiet one said, played. Inigo gave a cry and started staggering forward. Fezzik, it's you! True. And he reached out, grabbing Inigo just before he stumbled, brought him back to an upright position. Hold him just like that, the noisy brute said, and he moved in quickly, right arm raised, as he has done to Falkbridge. Splat! Fezzik dumped the noisy brute into the wagon beside Falkbridge, covered them both with a soiled blanket, then hurried back to Inigo, whom he had left leaning propped against a building. It's just so good to see you, Fezzik said then. Oh, it is. It is, but... Inigo's voice was winding steadily down now. I'm too weak for surprises. Were the last sound he got out before he fainted from fatigue and brandy and no food and bad sleep and lots of other things, none of them nutritious. Fezzik hoisted him up with one arm, took the wagon in the other, and hurried back to Falkbridge's house. He carried Inigo inside, placed him upstairs on Falkbridge's feather bed, then hurried away to the entrance of the thieves' quarter, dragging the wagon behind him. He made very sure that the dirty blanket covered both the victims, and outside the entrance the brute squad held a boot count of those they had removed. The total came out right, and by 11 in the morning, the great walled thieves' quarter was officially empty and padlocked. Released from active duty, Fezzik followed the wall around to a quiet place and waited. He was alone. Walls were never any problem for him, not so long as his arms worked, and he quickly scaled this one and hurried back through the quiet streets to Falkbridge's house. He made some tea, carried it upstairs, force-fed Inigo. Within a few moments, Inigo was blinking under his own power. It's just so good to see you, Fezzik said then. Oh, it is, Inigo agreed, and I'm sorry for fainting, but I have done nothing for 90 days but wait for Vizzini and drink brandy, and a surprise like seeing you, well, that was just too much for me on an empty stomach, but I'm fine now. Good, Fezzik said. Vizzini is dead. He is, eh? Dead, you say, Viz... And then he fainted again. Fezzik began berating himself. Oh, you stupid. If there's a right way and a wrong way, trust you to find the dumb way. Fool, back to the beginning was the rule. Fezzik really felt idiotic then because, after months of forgetting, now that he didn't need to remember anymore, he remembered. He hurried downstairs and made some tea and brought some crackers and honey and fed Inigo again. When Inigo blinked, Fezzik said, Rest. Thank you, my friend. No more fainting. And he closed his eyes and slept for an hour. Fezzik busied himself in Falkbridge's kitchen. He really didn't know how to prepare a proper meal, but he could heat and he could cool, and he could sniff the good meat from the rotted, so it wasn't too great a task to finally end up with something that once looked like roast beef and another thing that could have been a potato. The unexpected smell of hot food brought Inigo around, and he lay in bed, eating every bite Fezzik fed him. I never realized I was in such terrible condition, Inigo said, chewing away. Shh, you'll be fine now, Fezzik said, cutting another piece of meat, putting it into Inigo's mouth. Inigo chewed it carefully down. First you appearing so suddenly, and then, on top of that, the business of Vizzini. It was too much for me. It would have been too much for anybody, just rest. Fezzik began to cut another piece of meat. I feel such a baby, so helpless, Inigo said, taking the next bite, chewing away. You'll be as strong as ever by sundown, Fezzik promised, getting the next piece of meat ready. The six-fingered man is named Count Rugen, and he's here right now in Florin City. Interesting, Inigo managed this time before he fainted again. Fezzik stood over the still figure. Well, it is so good to see you, he said, and it's been such a long time, and I've just got so much news. Inigo only lay there. Fezzik hurried to Falkbridge's tub and plugged it up, and after a lot of work, he got it filled with steaming water, and then he dunked Inigo in, holding him down with one hand, holding Inigo's mouth shut with the other, and when the brandy began to sweat from the Spaniard's body, Fezzik emptied the tub and filled it again with icy water this time, and back he plunged Inigo, and when that water began to warm a bit back, he filled the tub with steaming stuff, and back went Inigo, and now the brandy was really oozing from his pores, and that was how it went, hour after hour, hot to icy cold to steaming hot, and then some tea, and then some toast, and then some steaming hot again, and more icy cold, and then a nap, and then more toast and less tea, but the longest steamer yet, and this time there wasn't much brandy left inside, and one final icy cold, and then a 2-hour sleep, until by mid-afternoon, they sat downstairs in Falkbridge's kitchen, and now at last, for the first time in 90 days, Inigo's eyes were almost bright. His hands did shake, but not all that noticeably, and perhaps the Inigo of before the brandy would have bested his fellow now in 60 minutes of solid fencing. But not too many other masters in the world would have survived for 5. Tell me briefly now, while I've been here with the brandy, you have been where? Well, I spent some time in a fishing village, and then I wandered a bit, and then a few weeks ago I found myself in Guilder, and but talk there was of the coming wedding, and perhaps a coming war, and I remembered Buttercup when I carried her up the cliffs of insanity. She was so pretty and soft, and I had never been so near perfume before that I thought it might be nice to see her wedding celebrations, so I came here, but my money was gone, and then they were forming a brute squad and needed giants, and I went to apply, and they beat me with clubs to see if I was strong enough, and when the clubs broke, they decided I was. I've been a brute first class all this past week. It's very good pay. Inigo nodded. All right again. And this time, please be brief. From the beginning, the man in black. Did he get by you? Yes, fairly too. Strength against strength. I was too slow and out of practice. Then it was he that killed Vizzini? That is my belief. Did he use his sword or his strength? Fezzik tried to remember. There weren't any sword wounds, and Vizzini didn't seem broken. There were just 2 goblets and Vizzini dead. Poison is my guess. Why would Vizzini take poison? Fezzik hadn't the least idea, but he was definitely dead? Fezzik was positive. Inigo began to pace the kitchen, his movements quick and sharp, the way his movements were before. All right, Vizzini is dead. Enough of that. Tell me briefly where the 6-figured Rugen is, so I may kill him. This may not be so easy, Inigo, because the Count is with the Prince, and the Prince is in his castle, and he has pledged not to leave it till after his wedding, for he fears another sneak attack from Guilder, and all the entrances but the main one are sealed for safety, and the main doors are guarded by 20 men. Inigo said, pacing faster now. If you fought 5 and I fenced 5, that would mean 10 gone, which would be bad because that would also mean 10 left and they would kill us. But, and now he picked up his pace even more, if you should take 6 and I took 8, that would mean 14 beaten, which would not be as bad but still bad enough, since the 6 remaining would kill us. And now he whirled on Fezzik. How many could you handle at the most? Well, some of them are from the brute squad, so I don't think more than 8. Leaving me 12, which is not impossible, but not the best way to spend your first evening after 3 months on brandy. And suddenly Inigo's body sagged and his eyes, bright a moment ago, now there was moisture. What had happened? Fezzik cried. Oh, my friend, I need Vizzini. I am not a planner. I follow. Tell me what to do, and no man alive does it better. But my mind is like fine wine. It travels badly. I go from thought to thought, but not with logic, and I forget things, and help me, Fezzik, what am I to do? Fezzik wanted to cry now, too. I'm the stupidest fellow that was ever born, you know that. I couldn't remember to come back here even after you made up that special lovely rhyme for me. I need Vizzini, but Vizzini is dead. And then Inigo was up again, blazing about the kitchen, and for the first time his fingers were snapping with excitement. I don't need Vizzini, I need his master. I need the man in black. Look, he bested me with steel, my greatness. He bested you with strength, yours. He must have outplanned and outthought Vizzini, and he will tell me how to break through the castle and kill the 6-fingered beast. If you have the least notion where the man in black is at the moment, relate quickly the answer. He sailed the 7 seas with the dread pirate Roberts. Why would he do a thing like that? Because he is a sailor for the dread pirate Roberts. A sailor? A common sailor? A common ordinary seaman best the great Inigo Montoya with a sword? Inconceivable. He must be the dread pirate Roberts. Otherwise it makes no sense. In any event, he is sailing far away. Count Rugen says so, and the prince himself gave the order. The prince wants no pirates around, with what all the trouble he is having with Guilder. Remember, they kidnapped the princess once. They might try. Fezzik, we kidnapped the princess once. You never were strong on memory, but even you should recall that we put the Guilder uniform pieces under the princess's saddle. Vizzini did it because he was under orders to do it. Someone wanted Guilder to look guilty, and who but a noble would want that, and what noble more than the war-loving prince himself? We never knew who hired Vizzini. I guess Humperdinck. And as for the Count's word on the man in black's whereabouts, since the Count is the same man who slaughtered my father, we can rest assured that he is certainly a terrific fellow. He started for the door. Come, we have much to do. Fezzik followed him through the darkening streets of the thieves' quarter. You'll explain things to me as we go along? Fezzik gasped. I'll explain them to you now. His blade-like body knifed on through the quiet streets. Fezzik hurrying alongside. A. I need to reach Count Rugen to at last avenge my father. B. I cannot plan on how to reach Count Rugen. C. Vizzini could have planned it for me, but C prime. Vizzini is unavailable, however. D. The man in black outplanned Vizzini, so therefore E. The man in black can get me to Count Rugen. But I told you, Prince Humperdinck, after he captured him, gave orders for all to hear that the man in black was to be returned safely to his ship. Everyone in Florida knows this to be so. A. Prince Humperdinck had some plan to kill his fiancée and hire us to carry them out, but B. The man in black ruined Prince Humperdinck's plans, however, eventually. C. Prince Humperdinck managed to capture the man in black, and as everybody in all Florin City also knows, Prince Humperdinck has a terrible temper, so therefore, D. If a man has a terrible temper, what could be more fun than losing it against the very fellow who spoiled your plans to kill your fiancée? They had reached the thieves' quarter wall now. Inigo jumped on Fezzik's shoulders, and Fezzik started to climb. Conclusion. 1. Inigo continued, not missing a beat. Since the prince is in Florin City taking out his temper on the man in black must also be in Florin City. Conclusion. 2. The man in black must not be too happy with his present situation. Conclusion. 3. I am in Florin City and need a planner to avenge my father, while he is in Florin City and needs a rescuer to salvage his future. And when people have equal needs of each other, conclusion, 4 and final, deals are made. Fezzik reached the top of the wall and started carefully climbing down the other side. I understand everything, he said. You understand nothing, but it really doesn't matter since what you mean is you're glad to see me, just as I'm glad to see you because no more loneliness. That's what I mean, said Fezzik. It was dusk when they began their search blindly through all of Florence City. Dusk, a day before the wedding. Count Rugen was about to begin his nightly experiments at that dusk, gathering up his notebooks from his room, filled with all his jottings. 5 levels underground, behind high castle walls, locked and chained and silent, Westley waited behind the machine. In a way, he still looked like Westley, except, of course, that he had been broken. 20 years of his life had been sucked away. 20 were left. Pain was anticipation. Soon the Count would come again. Against any wishes he had left, Westley went on crying. It was dusk when Buttercup went to see the prince. She knocked loudly, waited, knocked again. She could hear him shouting inside, and if it had not been so important, she would never have knocked the 3rd time, but she did, and the door was yanked open, and the look of anger on his face immediately changed to the sweetest smile. "Beloved," he said, "come in. A moment more is all I need." And he turned back to Yellen. "Look at her, Yellen, my bride-to-be. Has any man ever been so blessed?" Yellen shook his head. "Am I wrong, do you think, to go to any lengths then to protect her?" Yellen shook his head again. The prince was driving him crazy with his stories of a Guilder infiltration. Yellen had every spy he'd ever used working day and night, and not one of them had come up with anything about Guilder. And yet the prince insisted. Inwardly, Yellen sighed. It was beyond him. He was simply an enforcer, not a prince. In fact, the only remotely disturbing news he'd heard since he closed the thieves' quarter that morning was within the hour, when someone told him of a rumor that the ship of the dread pirate Roberts had perhaps been seen sailing all the way into Florence Channel itself. But such a thing, Yellen knew from long experience, was simply rumor. "I'll tell you, they are everywhere, these Guilders," the prince went on, "and since you seem unable to stop them, I wish to change some plans. All the gates have been sealed to my castle except the front one, yes?" "Yes, and 20 men guard it. Add 80 more. I want 100 men. Clear?" 100 men it will be, every brute available. Inside the castle, I'm quite safe. I have my own supplies, food, stables, enough. As long as they cannot get at me, I will survive. These, then, are the new and final plans. Jot them down. All 500th anniversary arrangements are canceled until after the wedding. The wedding is tomorrow at sunset. My bride and I will ride my wife to Florence Channel surrounded by all your enforcers. There, we will board a ship and begin our long-awaited honeymoon surrounded by every ship in the Florin Armada. Every ship but 4, Buttercup corrected. He blinked at her a moment in silence. Then he said, blowing her a kiss, but discreetly, so Yellen couldn't see, Yes, how forgetful I am, every ship but 4. He turned back to Yellen. But in his blink, in that following silence, Buttercup had seen it all. Those ships will stay with us until I deem it safe to release them. Of course, Guilder could attack then, but that is a chance we must risk. Let me think if there's anything else. The prince loved giving orders, especially the kind he knew would never need carrying out. Also, Yellen was a slow jotter, and that only added to the fun. Excuse, the prince said finally. With a bow, Yellen was gone. The 4 ships were never sent, Buttercup said when they were alone. Don't bother lying to me anymore. Whatever was done for your own good, Sweet Pudding. Somehow, I do not think so. You're nervous. I'm nervous. We're getting married tomorrow. We've got a right to be. You couldn't be more wrong, you know. I'm very calm. And in truth, she did seem that way. It doesn't matter whether you send the ships or not. Westley will come for me. There is a God, I know that. And there is love, I know that too. So Westley would save me. You're a silly girl. Now go to your room. Yes, I am a silly girl, and yes, again, I will go to my room, and you are a coward with a heart filled with nothing but fear. The prince had to laugh. The greatest hunter in the world, and you say I'm a coward? I do indeed. I'm getting much smarter as I age. I say you are a coward, and you are. I think you hunt only to reassure yourself that you are not what you are, the weakest thing to ever walk the earth. He will come for me, and then we will be gone, and you will be helpless for all your hunting, because Westley and I are joined by the bond of love, and you cannot track that, now with 1,000 bloodhounds, and you cannot break it, now with 1,000 swords. Humperdinck screamed toward her then, ripping at her autumn hair, yanking her from her feet and down the long curving corridor to her room, where he tore that door open and threw her inside and locked her there and started running for the underground entrance to the Zoo of Death. My father stopped reading. Go on, I said. Lost my place, he said, and I waited there, still weak with pneumonia and wet with fear until he started reading again. Inigo allowed Fezzik to open the door. Hey, I said, hold it. That's not right, you skipped. And then I quick caught my tongue because we just had that scene where I got all upset about Buttercup marrying Humperdinck when I'd accused him of skipping, and I didn't want any repeat of that. Daddy, I said, I don't mean anything, but wasn't the prince sort of running toward the zoo, and then the next thing you said was about Inigo? And maybe, I mean, shouldn't there be a page or like that in between? My father started to close the book. I'm not fighting, please don't close it. It is not for that, he said, and then he looked at me for a long time. Billy, he said, he almost never called me that. I loved it when he did. Anybody else, I hated it, but when the barber did it, I don't know, I just melted. Billy, do you trust me? What is that? Of course I do. Billy, you got pneumonia. You're taking this book very serious, I know, because we already fought once about it. I'm not fighting anymore. Listen to me. I never lied to you yet, did I? Okay, trust me. I don't want to read you the rest of this chapter, and I want you to say it's all right. Why? What happens in the rest of this chapter? If I tell you, I could accomplish the same by reading. Just say okay. I can't say that until I know what happens. But tell me what happens, and I'll tell you if it's okay, and I promise if I don't want to hear it, you can skip on to Inigo. You won't do me this favor? I'll sneak out of bed when you're asleep. I don't care where you hide the book. I'll find it and I'll read the rest of the chapter myself, so you might as well tell me. Billy, please? I gotcha. You might as well admit it. My father sighed this terrible sound. I knew I had him beaten, Ben. Westley dies, my father said. I said, what do you mean Westley dies? You mean dies? My father nodded. Prince Humperdinck kills him. He's only faking, though, right? My father shook his head, closed the book all the way. Oh, yes, I said, and I started to cry. I'm sorry, my father said. I'll leave you alone, and he left me. Who gets Humperdinck? I screamed after him. He stopped in the hall. I don't understand. Who kills Prince Humperdinck? At the end, somebody's got to get him. Is it Fezzik? Who? Nobody kills him. He lives. You mean he wins, Daddy? Jesus, what did you read me this thing for? And I buried my head in my pillow, and I never cried like that again, not once to this day. I could feel almost my heart emptying into my pillow. I guess the most amazing thing about crying, though, is that when you're in it, you think it'll go on forever, but it never really lasts half what you think. Not in terms of real time. In terms of real emotions, it's worse than you think, but not by the clock. When my father came back, it couldn't have been even an hour later. So, he said, shall we go on tonight or not? Shoot, I told him. Eyes dry, no catch in the throat, nothing. Fire when ready. With Inigo? Let's hear the murder, I said. I knew I wasn't about to bawl again. Like Buttercup's, my heart was now a secret garden and the walls were very high.